All right, let's get to Saturday. Carolina falls 82-69 to Duke. A game that just had three kind of distinct parts of the game. Duke builds a 15-point lead about 12 minutes through. Carolina then changes that 15-point deficit, cuts it all the way down to 1 at halftime, and eventually takes a 7-point lead about 4 minutes into the second half. Then the game kind of back and forth and even for maybe 4 minutes, and then the last 12 and a half minutes, it was all Duke. Outscored Carolina 29-10 and eventually wins it by 13. And, Adam, this is something you and I talked about last week. We said we thought Carolina could play well and still lose this game by 8 to 12 points. And we were right in that general area. Duke wins by 13. I think the hard reality of this is Duke is better than Carolina this season. I didn't think Carolina played poorly. Duke just ratcheted up its defense in those final 12 and a half minutes. Some of the very difficult shots that Carolina, mostly R.J. Davis, was making through the first 3 quarters of the game didn't go in the last quarter of the game. And the Tar Heels could not consistently get inside and score in those final 12 minutes or so because of Duke's excellent defense and their length and their size and shot blocking and all the things that we know has made Duke good this year. Plus, Duke is very good offensively. I mean, Carolina, I don't feel like Carolina played. I didn't leave that game going, man, Tar Heels were really bad on defense. In fact, I thought they were really good on defense for a portion of the game where they were forcing a lot of turnovers, and yet Duke shot 61% in the second half and 56% for the game. They being Duke, are very, very good. Carolina, I thought, played pretty well. And unfortunately, they just aren't as good as Duke this year. And when Duke was able to find itself defensively over those last 12 and a half minutes, spurred, I thought, a lot by Malik Brown, the Syracuse transfer, who came in and did a really good job for them. That was the ball game.
It's disheartening to look at these two scores.
It is 100% disheartening, period.
Yes.
I mean, it's disheartening, period, that you don't leave this game going, man, Carolina played poorly, or you leave this game going, Duke is at least 13 points better than the Tar Heels this year.
Well, if Duke doesn't win the national title, that will be a failure.
Yes, they are the best team right now. Could that change in March or in the tournament? Of course, we know crazy things happen in the tournament. At the end of the regular season, they are the best team in the country.
But just looking at these two games that Carolina's played against Duke, Duke won by 17 at Cameron. In my opinion, Carolina played significantly better in this game at the Smith Center, significantly better, and lost by 13. There's only a 4-point difference in these two games. This didn't feel like a 4-point difference in these two games. But the scoreboard says that's what it was, and that's discouraging. Carolina forces 13 Duke turnovers in the first 26 minutes of the game, during which time Carolina builds a lead and was really playing hard. Duke then only turns it over once the final 14 minutes of the game. Carolina's not able to get out and run. They have to play in the half court. It was really hard to get shots. Conversely, this is something you and Tyler Zeller have talked about, I think, since the Memphis game. Would be nice to count that game. When Duke fell behind by 6, they threw the ball to Cooper Flagg and said, drive the ball to the basket and score. And he did. When they needed a basket, they knew exactly what to do and were able to get that basket at a very high percentage level. When Carolina was trying to get these baskets, give the ball to RJ. He might have a 6'10 guy on him, but RJ, we need you to score, buddy. That's two very different types of offense. But that's the personnel they have that make it very difficult. That's also the personnel Carolina has, and this is the part that you and Z have talked about for 6 months now. when you have to have a basket, who are you going to throw it to and what are they going to do? And if the answer is you're going to throw it to RJ, who we love, one of the best all-time scorers in Carolina history, him trying to maneuver around a guy markedly taller than him and shoot a jump shot is a vastly different play than, okay, Koopy, drive it to the rim on Jalen Withers.
Especially when RJ Davis also has to be your point guard because your offense is running better with him at point guard. It's hard. This game was decided in April when these two rosters were built. That's just a fact. We've talked about it. Carolina fans know it. The Tar Heels, the construction of this roster is less than ideal. Carolina does not have, as we know, and this is not saying something negative about Venal Lubin because he's playing great and was one of the better players in this game for the Tar Heels. They do not have the traditional big guy that they have normally had forever with Carolina basketball. The Tar Heels are very small on the perimeter. They have good players, but very small on the perimeter. The guys that I think have the best opportunity to be able to create for themselves and get to the rim are freshmen. And so it's just a roster that isn't ideal. Whereas Duke is the tallest team in the nation. They've got some really talented freshmen. But if those freshmen are having off nights, which happen with freshmen, or are a little overwhelmed in a game, then they can go to guys who played in the national championship game last year for Purdue, or they can go to a guy that's been a starter at the ACC level for a couple of seasons like Malik Brown. This game was decided in April by the construction of the rosters. In no way do I feel like Carolina played poorly. In no way do I feel like this changes my opinion about the Tar Heels 0%. I still think Carolina's playing right now like a team that could go in the NCAA tournament and win a couple games. Because, again, the referendum on whether Carolina is an NCAA tournament team or not should not be, can they beat Duke? Because not many teams are going to. There are some teams that can, and Carolina can, but if these teams play 9 times or 10 times, Duke's going to win 9 of them. That's just a fact. And so it changes nothing, in my opinion, about the Tar Heels, other than, unfortunately, on paper, it gives them another quad 1 loss.
Well, if that is the referendum, can you beat Duke, then I don't want to hear anything about Illinois, who got absolutely dismembered by Duke on a neutral floor a couple weeks ago. So there's really 2 separate discussions to be had about this game. I apologize because I know some people don't like this. I don't have any time for the people who just want to talk about the game and talk about somehow Carolina ought to be better than Duke. Just the game. Like, do you not see the 2 teams? Duke is better than Carolina this year. It's hard for us to say, but that is the case. Look at them when they run out on the court. So I just don't think that's a valid argument that, well, you should beat them because we're Carolina and they're Duke.
And if the other side of that argument, if you want to talk about the roster construction and you want to talk about why their team looks that way and why the Tar Heels look the other way, that is a separate discussion.
That's the second discussion.
And that's why the Tar Heels just hired a general manager.
Making a fundamental change in the way they do things to try to avoid this same situation. So the 2 discussions are the game in which Duke is better. I'm sorry, but it's true. They have 3, I think, top 10 picks on their team right now. Carolina has 0. In what world do you think these are 2 evenly matched squads? But the other discussion is completely valid. I'm totally on board with that. How did it get that way? That is something that you have to evaluate and figure out and do things like hire a GM and empower that person to say, look, here's these 2 rosters this year. Can't have this anymore.
That's right.
Do what you got to do. And that will play out this spring and summer, we assume. So it's a frustrating loss because fantastic crowd.
It was a good crowd. What, Adam, honestly, better than I thought. And you and I both been to a lot. We're lucky. We've been to a lot of Carolina Duke games. And more times than not, the energy in the building is incredible. I have to admit, I kind of thought this one, with the way the seasons have gone for these 2 teams, I wasn't sure what it was going to be like in the Smith Center. I knew it would still have an edge to it because it was Carolina Duke. This was an awesome crowd and an engaged crowd and a crowd that was there to help and did help.
Yeah, it felt like they decided as a group of 22,000, we're going to pull these boys along. We're going to do it. We understand they might not be as good on paper. We're going to do it. Every shot we're going to treat like it's the greatest shot in Carolina basketball history. And during that stretch in the second half, well, 2 times really, if RJ Davis had made that 3 at halftime,
the Smith Center may have crumbled if that had gone in.
And if Seth Trimble doesn't get hip checked when he's going to steal the ball and go down and dunk it to give Carolina a 7 or 8 point lead, that would have been one of the loudest moments in the 40 years of the Smith Center. Neither of those 2 things happened. One, because the ball didn't go in, and the other, because Con Knipple is a great defenseman, evidently, in hockey. But the crowd was fantastic, and to be able to – they played a big part in how close that game was and how tough Carolina played. But they were like the living embodiment of RJ Davis. Yeah. Everybody was like, we're going to be RJ today and help these boys. And they tried. Duke's just good. They're just good. I don't want it to be true.
This is why Adam is on the show. Like, you said that so well, Adam, about the 2 different discussions. Because I know there's going to be people who, Jones and Adam, they're not telling the truth. We are telling you the truth. Jones and Adam accepting that the Tar Heels are, that's not what we're saying. It has to change. Hubert Davis knows it. Adam knows it. You know it. Jim Tanner knows it. It's not okay to run out there with the rosters looking that way. There's going to be years where one team's better than the other team. That happens. But the dramatic divide between these 2 rosters is not okay. And everybody knows that. So make sure you understand that. That's why this is going to be a critical couple of months upcoming for the Tar Heels, and why they've already made some massive changes of how they operate and how those changes then manifest themselves over the next couple of months, as Adam very eloquently said a moment ago, is going to be incredibly important for the Tar Heels. So, again, nothing that happened on Saturday changes my immediate opinion about what's going on with either one of these teams in this moment. The Tar Heels are a better team now than they were 2 months ago. They are playing well enough to go to the NCAA tournament and win some games. They can compete against a large amount of teams that are going to be in the tournament. Because they are North Carolina, and we all expect them to be North Carolina, the standard is higher here, and that's it. Fine, it should be. They aren't up to the standard that everybody would like for Carolina basketball to be consistent. I think Hubert Davis would say that. He said that a bunch this year. He loves his team. He's proud of them. But they haven't been as consistent as he would like for them to be. And unfortunately, the way the schedule worked this year, they ended up getting some very real-world opportunities to see that, because they ended up playing some of the very best teams in the country this year: Auburn, Alabama, Duke twice, Florida, Michigan State, etc. So, Carolina goes to Charlotte now, unless there's anything else you got from Saturday, Adam.
Well, I would just say 2 things. Number one, what you said is right. The way Carolina played on Saturday, I believe they beat 90% of the teams in the country.
Absolutely.
They beat Michigan State. They beat Florida. They beat all the silly teams that Carolina lost to in the ACC, other than Duke and maybe Clemson. They win those games. This is a better team. So that's one. Two, just to clear up something. There seems to be a lot of confusion about why Hubert Davis took R.J. Davis out during the stretch we're talking about when the Tar Heels struggled in the second half. Because R.J. Davis wasn't physically able to play. I don't know if they didn't talk about this on TV or what, and I understand everybody is seeing the game from a different vantage point in the Smith Center or at home. As soon as he came out of the game, he went to the bench. Doug Halverson and Jonas Saracen immediately started working on him because he was cramping. He could barely stand up. So it wasn't like Hubert Davis thought, well, RJ's pretty much chucking it in from everywhere. I wonder what we could do if he was out.
Right.
He had to come out of the game. And that stretch was important. Like, that goes back to the discussion we just had about the roster you have. If you have to take out your best guy and things immediately fall apart, that's an issue. So that's why that happened. I can tell by the feedback that some people don't realize that and think that was just a decision that was made. It wasn't. And so that's why that happened.
I just want to do one. Adam said they beat 90% of the team. I mean, there were some times, and for some reason, Adam, Vin Allen Lubin is the one who pops into my mind, where there were a couple times where he was in exactly the right place to get the rebound or to do something that was going to be positive for Carolina. But all of a sudden, Maluak or somebody is just able to get the ball away from him, and Duke's heading the other way. And again, it is just what it is right now.
And I remember the play you're talking about, and I'm not even sure Maluak had done the right thing.
Right.
But because he is physically what he is, he was able to make the play that Duke needed him to make. And that's what we're talking about with the roster. When you do all the right things, and they don't necessarily do the right thing, like physically in the game of basketball, but because of their wingspan or height or whatever, they're able to negate what you did. That's what we're talking about with the way the roster looks.
There's old Adam trying to sugarcoat it again.